Good morning, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I'm going to be revisiting the axe from last video, the Swedish military axe. I fixed it so the head now is on nice and sound. Well, fingers crossed it is, but I think it is. I've got a knife here which I've had a play with. I don't know if you've seen the video with this in it. It's the Hultafors cheap and cheerful little Scandi. I'll talk about that later. And I thought to even things up I'd bring an expensive one as well. And I've got my rehandled Falkniven S1X. So those are my tools for the day. Well, I need to light the fire now. And well, it pissed down last night, really wet. So I gathered some twigs and they are soaking, so I thought, well, it's a good opportunity for me to use my discs, my firelighting waxed card discs, which are basically a substitute for birch bark because I don't have any decent birch bark up here. They live in this little pot. If you're a regular viewer, you've seen them before, and I did a video on how to make them. Well, I usually use two. So I'm going to take two out, but I've got a little plan. Now, the only thing I do find with these, because they're flat, they tend to want to fall over and lay like that. So what I thought, if I put two together, make a slit, make them into a cross, they should stand up. Give it a go. Well, bit of sexy bending. There we are, that should stand up. So I can make a bundle of twigs with a bit of a void, put that in, light it up. And I'm going to use my controversial choice, the jet lighter, because it'll light that real easily. Cold. That worked a treat. The springy twigs up here are a bit of a pain, as you've probably seen before, but that worked great. Goes to show it's a good job I always split some wood here and leave it under the tarp, because that won't be going as well as it is now if I didn't have split wood. And as we all know, split wood burns better than wood which has not been split. Thank you, Uncle Ray, for that pearl of wisdom in your TV show. Very little smoke with this, hardly anything at all, and the wind is in my favour today, not blowing in my face. Although 300 yards that way it's blowing a gale, but I'm in a nice little sheltered spot here 80% of the time. Oh, looking forward to a cup of tea now. Yorkshire tea, you know where you are, Yorkshire tea. While I'm sitting here comfortably looking at my fire and having my cup of tea, I thought I'd address 2 comments I recently had, and they made sense, to be fair, so I thought I'd address them just in case anybody else is wondering. First comment, and this comment was from a regular viewer, and he said, why do I put myself through all the aggravation of cutting and splitting wood up? Why don't I just burn it in the round? Pretty simple explanation to that one. I'll go back a bit in time. When I first started coming up here, I'd recently discovered the Siberian fire lay. Hang on. Because I watch Lars from Survival Russia. So for a whole winter, I was using a Siberian fire lay here with a big Moors style pot hanger setup. And to be fair, it looked a bit intrusive. Now people are going to walk through here once in a blue moon, and I don't want my camp to look like a mess. So I decided I'd stop using that, because, you know, the fire lay itself was big, and every time I came here I was lighting it up. And to be fair, because of the dampness here, it was taking a while for them logs to get going. So I knocked that one on the head, and I've lost my train of thought. So I like to use my tools. I wouldn't call myself a reviewer, just an enjoyer of tools. And as we know, split wood burns better, less smoke, and it is damp here. So that's basically why I don't burn in the round. Most of the stuff, unless I've cut the dead standing down or it's a fresh fallen, it's going to be wet and it's going to take a while to get going. Smoke, just crap really. So that's why I like to use split wood and burn my fire the way I do. I keep it relatively small. I usually know how much to put on so I can burn it all. I occasionally put a big one on and burn it through and then finish it off the following visit. But I like to burn the fire out, and doing it this way, the fire is practically non-existent by the time I leave. So that's number 1. Number 2, a guy had watched my review, my original review on this knife, the Falkniven, and I think his words were, "Dude, why didn't you just pick something up from the floor?" Again, it's damp here, and most of the stuff I pick up from the floor is soaking wet. And I was actually giving myself a scenario in that review, as if it was 2 foot of snow on the ground and I was using one dead standing tree for everything. So I made a batten out of it to split the wood down. I chopped sections up, which this knife wasn't particularly good at the time of chopping because it had that skinny handle on, and that's why I did that. As for this knife, if I was buying another one, I wouldn't buy the coating. Thinking about it, yes, I know the edge lasts a long time because it's really good steel, but at some point it's going to need sharpening, and when I sharpen it, quite a bit of that coating is going to come off. I am going to do a video on sharpening a convex grind soon-ish when something needs sharpening. At the moment this one's still okay, and because I usually carry a smaller knife if I'm carrying this anyway, it doesn't do that much fine work. Basically just splits and cuts branches off. So there's two things addressed. Sorry if I rabble on a bit, but I wanted to address them. Right, back to my cup of tea. Talk about this 2 minutes before I start playing with it. But I fixed the head, obviously. I'll just run you through what I did. I couldn't pull the wedges out. They were in just too far. So I slowly tapped the head off. Bang, bang, bang. Until it came off. And it did take about 10 minutes. Then I took all the wedges out, and the larger wedge in there had 3 prongs sticking out at all different angles. So there was no way I was pulling it out without taking the head off. I pulled them out. I took about a centimetre saw cut further down. I whacked it back in. Oh no, hang on. I shaved a bit here so it would go on more, and I basically knocked it on about a centimetre more. I made an oak wedge, which I put in, tapped that in, then turned it over, tapped this end with a lump hammer, but unfortunately, and I don't know if I showed this last week, this portion here was tiny, and I managed to split a bit off. So I thought, well, I'll just cut it off, make it flatter, so next time, if I need to hit it, it won't split. And that done the job. So I did take about that much off the top and just reshaped it. Knocked it all on, knocked the wedge in. There was still a few little voids, so I filled them up with some pieces of oak as well. If you're well into axes, you probably thought I should have just put a new handle on it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be fine. And then I knocked the round edge wedge back in on top of it, put a bit of linseed oil on it, and it's basically been standing there in the shed for about 5 days since I done it. Hopefully that is now sound. This splitting wedge I put on didn't perform very well chopping last week. If I was felling a tree or cutting green wood, it wouldn't be a problem. But this wood up here is pretty tough, and it was glancing off a couple of times, so that may not be the best grind to put on. I'm no axe expert on grinds. I usually do what I think's best, which is a polished convex grind. That one may be just that bit too steep. But I'm going to have another go now, chopping a round up with it. Well, I actually don't think it's that bad. Don't really think it's worth changing it. I'm a bit dubious about going hell for leather at it, because it's a bit dangerous. Small log and secured on the floor. You know, if it was 20 foot long and I was cutting sections off as I was going, so it wasn't rolling around, I think I'd be more inclined to go at it with a bit more gusto. But it's a bit dangerous. I think I'll leave it. Last thing I want is sticking that thing in my shin. No, I'm not going to touch the edge. Seeing as I predominantly split anyway, I think it's just fine. But that's that addressed. Well, I just remembered there's a fallen one on the floor. About 40 foot from camp. So I think I'll have a bit of a chop. Nothing wrong with that. All that chopping's giving me a thirst. Better put another cuppa on. What a difference with a stable log. Worked a treat. Well, that's it. I'm not changing the grind now. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying Hultafors axes are made for limbing and a bit of chopping. They're not good splitters. Oh my god, they're not. That thing splits like a demon, and I'll do a bit more. Now, one thing I can't remember if I mentioned earlier, I brought my Dustrude saw with me today, and there's a reason why I bought that saw. Because I noticed when I changed the saw blade on the Boreal 21, the Raker hardwood blade that I got sent, the teeth were quite far apart. And I was looking at my Dustrude saw in the house, and the teeth are quite close together, and that's a backhoe blade. So I thought I'd bring the Dustrude out today. I know it's a little bit longer than the Boreal 21, but I'll do a bit of sawing with that, and I'll see. I can actually look back on last week's video and see how much effort I put in to sawing with the Boreal, with the hardwood blade, against sawing with the Dustrude with the hardwood small teeth blade. Well, after I've had my another cup of tea, I'm going to do some sawing with that and check it out. Well, I'm waiting for it to boil. I might as well show you what I've got here. Well, the Dustrude saw's in here, and this is a Duluth case, and this is the case that's meant for the saw. There's plenty of other people making these now, but at the time I bought this, there weren't nowhere near the amount of people making things like this, so I bought the case to go with it because I'm flash. Well, I have the saw, and it's got a spare blade pocket in it, so I always carry a spare blade. And what else I have in here, which you may be interested in, I got a huge strop. Basically a 20-inch strop. I've only used one section of it, the other section's unused. And what I did on the other side, because I like to sharpen with micro mesh, they don't last forever, so I used the old micro mesh, the worn one, and stuck it on there. So I got 3 different grades, so I can actually put a mirror edge on something with just this. Obviously I can't do a hell of a lot of sharpening on it because they're pretty fine, but I can really touch an edge up well with that, and you know, doesn't take any room up. There we are. Just enough tension on it. I do find this a lot more comfortable to use because of the slimmer handle than the Spring Creek. But they don't make these anymore. I think poor old Bob Dustrude passed away. So I think you're more or less stuck now with the Boreal and the Spring Creek. they're both great anyway. But the handle on this one is more comfortable than the Spring Creek. The Spring Creek uses box section here, whereas this is a C section. But there's not a lot of difference. I think if Spring Creek went thinner, saying that, mine, I don't know, the smaller Spring Creeks may have a smaller section. Perhaps they use the larger section on the big one because it's 30 inches long and it needs that extra strength. I really don't know, and I'm not intending on buying another one because now I've got 3 folding bow saws. Right, I think my kettle's boiled now. There's not much in it really. I think the other blade does cut quicker. The only problem I find with this saw, and I've just realised it now because I haven't used it for a while, the cuts go wonky. No matter how straight I try and saw, the cut goes like that. I didn't find that with the boreal. Look at another one. See what I mean? Well, I've just filmed another video which is going to be a standalone video on battening with a knife, and I've done this for subscriber Vibe Orbit because he needed a bit of advice. He needed pointed in the right direction because he's read a load of crap about you shouldn't batten online. So I've done a standalone video. Hopefully it'll be helpful for people, and it's my take on battening with a knife, what you should and what you shouldn't do. Well, I'm enjoying myself today. It's reasonably warm. It's a little bit windy, but I'm having a nice day. And I've just sat down now with cup of tea number 3. Gotta have your tea. And I've done a bit of splitting as well with the axe. Not a hell of a lot, because I didn't want to cut too much wood up. And all is good with the world. I'm going to have a little play with this next. I didn't do a very good job there. I cut too much off. Took me ages to sharpen it. If you saw the video with this in it, I wasn't very complimentary. The grind was terrible. One side was just so much different to the other. So what I've done, I just got the scratches out on the one side and I heavily sharpened on the other to even it up. And it's still a bit, it's a damn sight better than it was. And I sharpened this on DMT and I finished it off on ceramic stones and then stropped it, and yes, it's pretty sharp. I just decided to make a little kydex sheath. I like green and orange, it looks good together. Obviously the other sheath, after cutting the crossguard up, didn't have any retention. That does. Nice and simple, and I've done that for a future project, which I hope comes off, because I've been planning it for a long time. as you probably noticed, I make a lot of feather sticks. Now, I'm reasonably good at making feather sticks, and that's a lot of practice has gone into that. I'd say I've been making feather sticks for knocking on 20 years now, so I've had a lot of practice, and it's a lot to do with wood selection and grind. Making feather sticks is basically a really good skill, and it teaches you knife control. But something like this has got a really shallow grind, and I do struggle to make decent ones with something with a grind that shallow. And I'm going to make one now, and I'm going to see how it goes. They're not essential. You know, if you've got a man-made fire lighter or a pile of birch bark, you can get a fire going, no problem at all. It's just a skill I rate, I value it, and I do it. Splitting technique that not a lot of people will like. This is one good thing about having a sheath here. Always be mindful of slippage. You really don't want to slip. You wouldn't want your knife nicking your chin, would you? No. So not a technique I'd use if I was starting out. But if you haven't got anything solid to tap on, well, it's a technique you can use. Let's give this a go. Don't actually need a 4-inch blade to make feather sticks. If you've got a carving knife, there's a good chance you can make some decent feather sticks with a small 2-inch blade carving knife. Well, I was a bit slow. My grinds on a Scandi, I can do them a lot quicker. I've got to think a bit more with this bevel, but that's pretty doable. I'm going to grab a ferro rod now and try it out, because I have ground the back spine on it. Houston, we have a problem. This is really soft. Hell for leather method. Well, there's definitely something wrong with the steel of that. Yeah, it feels really soft. I may have made a right mistake spending about 40 minutes sharpening that up and making a sheath for it. Oh well, live and learn. Wind's picked up. Well, that was disappointing. Definitely something wrong with that. I'll have to do my homework, find out what steel it is, and how it's been heat treated, because I wasn't pleased with that. Didn't work very well at all. Maybe I'll try it with a better ferro rod, but there's nothing really wrong with the old lumper. Well, thanks very much for watching. Do appreciate your support. them thumbs up I always appreciate. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, please do so, I would appreciate it. Until the next time, ta-ra. For the faithful, watch till the end. I haven't really got a lot to say today. Not particularly pleased with that knife, but there we are, what you expect for that sort of money. I'd get a more over that Hultafors any day of the week. If you're wondering why I've revamped a few old videos and put them up, 2 reasons. I'll be completely honest with you. First reason is, for some apparent reason, music, I think, I couldn't monetize them, and they needed cutting down anyway and putting together, so that's basically the 2 reasons why I've done it. Nobody was watching them, going to waste, too long, boring. I cut them down, and now I can make a couple of pence out of them. The axe, I do like that axe, and obviously I did a good job of fixing the head because it didn't move. I'm very excited as well because I've got a new axe coming. I've done a deal with a chap who's like an axe guru from Sweden, and I'm making him a knife, and he's sending me a Wetterling's forest axe, which apparently are quite rare now. And the reason I want one is a little bit bigger than the Scandinavian forest axe from GB, and it's got a heavier head with a better angle for splitting. I don't do much chopping anyway, I do a lot of splitting, and I've gone to like a bigger axe. I don't know if it's a penis extension and it makes me feel more manly, I haven't got a clue. It's not, but I do like a bigger axe. Yeah, they're a bit more cumbersome to carry, but what's wrong with being tool heavy? I like being tool heavy, I like my tools. Well, that's about it really. Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate you regulars, and your comments, always good to know, and your opinions. And if I've done something which you think is stupid, just let me know. I'll probably ignore you anyway, but let me know. I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to ignore you. I'm going to listen to you. Nobody knows everything, and anybody who does say they know everything is a dick. People who call themselves experts, I'd never call myself a bushcraft expert. And I'll tell you why. Because I know very little about tracking, and my plant knowledge is adequate to say the least. That's why I stick to knives, fire, axes and a bit of cooking. It's what I know, it's what I'll stick to.